There are moments when I am immersed in memories, quiet corners of my mind where time seems to flow by itself. I remember the summer when I was 30 and met my husband, Paolo. He was a dreamer, passionate about books and music, and his smile could disarm anyone. Those days seemed golden, full of promise. We spent long evenings sitting by the lake, talking about everything and nothing, imagining our future together. Now, at 55, the smiles are fewer, and the dreams have been replaced by quarrels and resentments. We are like two strangers trying to remember how we used to love each other. The years take their toll, and somewhere along the way we lost the magic that once brought us together. My last fight with Paolo was intense, the bitter words exchanged like knives, cutting deep until there was nothing left to say. He left that evening, slamming the door behind him, leaving me alone in the silence of our home. I wasn't sure if it was temporary or if he was gone for good, and the uncertainty weighed on me. I tried to occupy myself by tidying the house, but the silence grew louder and louder, weighing on me. To clear my head, I turned to my sanctuary, Pilates. It had always been my salvation, a way to connect with my body, to remind myself that I was still strong and beautiful, despite the doubts that had begun to creep into my soul. I spread out the rug in the living room and pulled back the curtains, opening the view of the garden outside the window. The soft sunlight filled the room with a warm glow, and I began my exercises. Slowly I moved through the exercises, letting my body take control, concentrating on the soft burning of each stretch. I sagged my back into cow-cat pose, feeling the tension go away. Then I sat in a split, fully lowered, savoring the deep stretch that still felt effortless after years of practice. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, letting the movements ground me, letting the rhythm of my body drown out the chaos in my mind. I didn't yet know that my nephew Daniel had arrived. He had already turned 30 and was here for the summer, as he often was. He wasn't a blood relative of mine, the son of a friend who always called me auntie, but we were close. He was my confidant for many years, a man who listened without judgment and always seemed to understand me better than anyone else. I didn't hear him walk through the backyard, nor did I notice him at the window when he saw me. From where he stood, Daniel had a great view of the living room. He stopped, his breath catching for a moment as he watched me. I was lost in my movements, not noticing his presence. He watched me arch my spine, the muscles of my back showing through under my skin, the graceful, effortless curve of my body. He shouldn't have been watching, he knew that, but he couldn't help it. There was something captivating about the way I moved, the way I owned my body, even now, when everything else seemed so uncertain. His mouth went dry, his gaze hardened, and a feeling of heat settled in his chest, spreading to his stomach. Daniel had always admired me. He thought I was beautiful, and over the years I'd gotten even more beautiful. There was a maturity about me, a strength that I radiated, especially when I didn't know I was being watched. He felt his heart pounding in his chest, and an unfamiliar, guilty excitement swept over him. He knew he should turn away, should make his presence known, but instead he stood there mesmerized. There was something about seeing me in that moment so vulnerable, so graceful, that kept him from turning away. Finally I turned, seeing movement out of the corner of my eye. My gaze met Daniel's through the window. I was stunned, a look of surprise and something else on my face. I slowly straightened up and rose to my feet. My cheeks flushed slightly as I realized how long he could have been standing there. There was a strange electricity in the air, a sudden realization of a space between us that hadn't been there before. "Daniel, how long have you been standing there?" I exclaimed, my voice more breathless than I realized. I tried to keep my tone light, but I could feel my cheeks warming, my heart racing. He grinned mischievously, rubbing the back of his head. "Not for long, Auntie. I didn't mean to interrupt the class. You seemed so focused." He paused, and there was a glint in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before, something unspoken passing between us, something neither of us knew how to name. His voice was soft, almost reverent, and it made my stomach flutter with surprise. I tried to wave it away with a wave of my hand at him. "Well, come on in. Don't just stand there. You must be hungry after your trip." I turned and walked toward the kitchen, trying to even out my breathing, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled between us. But I could feel his presence behind me, his gaze lingering on me, his hesitation before following him. But when he stepped inside, there was an energy between us, a tense silence that lingered as he followed me into the kitchen. He glanced at me from time to time, and I could feel his gaze even when I wasn't looking. It was as if something had shifted, some line had been blurred, and part of me wondered if this was just the beginning of something neither of us understood yet. I busied myself making tea, my hands shaking slightly as I reached for the kettle. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, keeping his eyes on me. We were talking. The conversation was light and casual, but underneath there was a tension, an attraction that neither of us recognized, but both of us felt. He told me about his work, his plans for the summer, and I listened, nodding, smiling, but my thoughts kept coming back to the way he was looking at me through the window. There was something different about him this time, a tenseness, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. And as I poured the tea, my hands still wobbly, I wondered what it meant, what this summer would bring. Part of me wanted to push the feeling away, to pretend nothing had changed, but another part of me, a deeper, more restless part, was curious, intrigued by the possibilities. We sat there, sipping our tea, and the silence between us grew heavier, more meaningful. I looked up at him, our eyes met, and in that moment I realized that whatever was happening between us, it wasn't something we could ignore. It was there, it was undeniable, and it scared me but also excited me. I didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in a long time I felt alive, like the world was full of possibilities again.